You say, "I'm fine," dozens of times each week, perhaps even each day. But have you ever stopped to ask yourself what happens in that precise moment when you speak those words while feeling their opposite? What occurs in the depths of your psyche when you deny what is genuinely stirring within you? I have spent my entire life studying the hidden chambers of the human soul, and I can tell you this with absolute certainty. Every time you say, "I'm fine," when you are not simply telling a small social lie. You are committing an act of profound psychological violence against yourself. You are feeding the very forces within you that will one day demand to be heard, often in the most devastating ways. The question is not whether these denied feelings will surface. The question is, will you meet them consciously, or will they meet you in the darkness? Before we venture deeper into this exploration, I must ask a small favor. If you find value in these psychological insights, if something within you recognizes the truth of what we are discussing, please consider subscribing to this channel. And I am genuinely curious, leave a comment telling me what city you are watching from and what time it is where you are. I find it remarkable that we can share these intimate explorations of the psyche across such distances, across time zones, across the boundaries that usually separate one human consciousness from another. Your presence here, your willingness to look within, matters more than you know. Now, let us begin with what I believe you need to understand. I have sat with hundreds of individuals in the analytic hour, and I can tell you that beneath the surface of nearly every psychological disturbance lies this fundamental split, the division between what we truly feel and what we permit ourselves to acknowledge and express. I have watched brilliant minds unravel, not from their struggles, but from their refusal to consciously engage with those struggles. I have also witnessed the profound healing that occurs when someone finally tells the truth about their inner life, first to themselves, then to another human being. You see, right now, you may be living with a growing sense of disconnection from yourself. You go through the motions, you say the right things, but somewhere deep inside, you feel increasingly hollow, increasingly false. Perhaps you have noticed this. Perhaps you wake up in the morning, and for a moment, before you remember to put on your social face, you feel a heaviness, a quiet desperation. Then someone asks how you are, and without thinking, you respond, "I'm fine." And something within you dies a little. You want to feel real again. "I'm fine." You want your words to match your inner experience. You want relationships where you can be genuinely known, not simply admired or tolerated for the performance you give. You want the relief of not carrying this enormous burden of pretense, but you do not know how to get there, and more. Importantly, you fear what might happen if you stop maintaining the facade. Let me address some common misconceptions, because if we do not clear these away, we cannot proceed honestly. Many people believe that emotional honesty means overwhelming others with every feeling, that it means becoming a burden, collapsing into self-indulgence. This is not what I am suggesting. Others believe that saying, "I'm fine," is simply good manners, social grace, the oil that keeps social machinery running smoothly. There is some truth to this, but it confuses discretion with denial, and these are not the same thing. Some of you fear that your real feelings are too dark, too much, too shameful to acknowledge even to yourself. You have been taught that psychological wholeness means always being positive, well-adjusted, productive. This is a dangerous falsehood. Wholeness means integrating all aspects of yourself, including what you have deemed unacceptable. And finally, many believe the solution is simply to start being more honest, to start blurting out whatever they feel. But this is far more nuanced. You cannot simply demolish your defenses without understanding why they exist and without developing the psychological capacity to contain what lies beneath them. What I offer you here is not a simple communication technique. This is a profound psychological practice, a pathway to what I call Individuation. The process of becoming who you truly are. This is not about self-improvement. This is about self-recovery. You are not trying to become a better version of the false self. You are trying to excavate the real self that has been buried beneath years of, "I'm fine." Now let me tell you a story. Because stories carry psychological truth in ways that theories cannot. Several years ago, a patient came to me. A professional man in his 40s, successful by every external measure. He sought my help because he was experiencing what he called a vague unease, a sense that something was wrong though he could not identify what. He functioned perfectly well. He went to work, fulfilled his duties, maintained his relationships. Everyone who knew him would say he was fine. He said it himself, constantly. We began our work together, and for many weeks, we seemed to make little progress. He would sit in my consulting room and tell me about his life in measured, reasonable tones. Everything was manageable. Challenges were being handled. He was fine, really. And perhaps he had been mistaken to seek analysis at all. But then, the dreams began. He came to me one morning, visibly shaken, and told me this. He had dreamed that he was walking through his own house, a house that in waking life he knew intimately. But in the dream, he noticed a door he had never seen before, hidden behind a bookshelf in his study. Curious, he moved the bookshelf aside and opened the door. It led to a stone staircase descending into darkness. He went down, though in the dream he felt great apprehension. At the bottom, he found himself in a vast basement room he had never known existed. The smell hit him first, a terrible, putrid odor of decay. As his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he saw that the room was filled with rotting food, broken furniture, torn photographs, and in the corner, something that looked like a pile of old clothing, but as he looked closer, he realized with horror that it was moving, breathing, alive somehow. He woke in a sweat, his heart pounding, and here is what is significant. After telling me this dream, he immediately tried to dismiss it, to return to his usual stance. "I am sure it is nothing," he said. "Perhaps something I ate before bed." The unconscious was showing him precisely what we do when we say, "I'm fine," while feeling otherwise. We are creating a psychological basement, a hidden room where we dump everything we refuse to acknowledge. The rotting food, those were unfelt griefs, swallowed, angers, denied disappointments, all decomposing in the darkness. The broken furniture represented relationships damaged by his emotional unavailability. Connections, he had told himself, did not matter. The torn photographs were memories he had minimized. Moments when he had needed something he did not permit himself to ask for. And that living thing in the corner, that breathing presence that was his shadow. All the vitality and authentic emotion he had relegated to the dark, which had taken on a life of its own. Over the following months, this dream recurred with increasing intensity. The room grew larger, the smell grew worse, and in his waking life, his vague unease began to sharpen into symptoms he could no longer ignore. He began to experience panic attacks. His sleep became severely disturbed. He found himself weeping without apparent cause. His carefully maintained presentation was beginning to crack. This is what the psyche does. When we deny it for too long, it escalates. It will be heard. And I said to him, with all the compassion I could muster, "You see, you are not fine. You have never been fine, and your unconscious will not allow you to continue pretending otherwise." The breakthrough came when he finally allowed himself to speak the truth. In one session, when I asked how he was, instead of his usual response, he simply began to weep. And through his tears, he said, "I am so tired. I am so deeply, profoundly tired. and I have been for years. I am not fine. I have not been fine since I was a child. This was the beginning of his real work. Once he acknowledged this, once he stopped maintaining the facade, even in the privacy of his own mind, we could begin to explore that basement room together, to bring light and air to what had been rotting in the dark. It was difficult work, painful work, but it was real. And slowly, very slowly, he began to feel alive again. This brings me to something deeply personal, something from my own life. After my break with Freud, I entered a period of profound psychological upheaval. I experienced visions, heard voices, felt I was descending into madness. For several years, I could not say, "I'm fine," because I was quite evidently not fine by any conventional measure. I was a respected psychiatrist experiencing the very symptoms I treated in my patients. I could have hidden this. I could have maintained my professional facade, told everyone I was managing well, pushed these experiences into that basement room, but I knew, even in the midst of my disorientation, that these experiences were trying to tell me something essential. The unconscious was erupting into my conscious life with such force, precisely because it had something crucial to communicate. So I did something that required more courage than I knew I possessed. I allowed it. I descended into those depths consciously. I kept journals of my visions. I engaged with the figures that appeared to me. I took my own psychological crisis seriously as psychological material, not as something to be managed or suppressed. It was the most isolating period of my life. How could I explain to colleagues, to friends, to my wife, that I was engaged in conversations with figures from my unconscious, that I was building stone structures in my garden as a form of active imagination? I could not say, "I'm fine," because I was actively choosing to be not fine. To allow myself to fall apart so that I could come back together in a more authentic configuration. What I discovered in that darkness became the foundation of all my subsequent work. The archetypes, the collective unconscious, the process of individuation. None of this would have emerged if I had maintained my professional composure and denied what was happening within me. My honesty with my own psychological state, my willingness to be truly not fine, led to my greatest contributions to our understanding of the human psyche. But I will tell you, it was lonely. When you stop saying, "I'm fine," when you allow yourself to be genuinely in process, genuinely struggling, genuinely uncertain, many people become uncomfortable. They want you to reassure them that everything is manageable, that the human psyche is not as wild and mysterious as it actually is. Your authenticity confronts them with their own denied depths. Let me offer you a parable, a way of understanding this through image and metaphor. Imagine a person walking through life, going about their daily business. This person is being followed everywhere by their shadow, as we all are, quite literally when the sun shines. But this person becomes convinced that their shadow is dangerous, shameful, something that should not exist. So they begin trying to outrun it. They walk faster. They run. They move from place to place, always trying to escape that dark shape following behind them. But of course, the faster they run, the more frantically they move. The shadow keeps pace. In fact, it seems to grow larger, more menacing. They tell everyone they meet, "I'm fine, just out for a run, just keeping busy. Everything is wonderful." But inside, they are terrified and exhausted. Other people, seeing this person running frantically, begin to worry. "Are you all right?" they ask. "I'm fine," the person shouts over their shoulder. Still running. "Absolutely fine. Just very busy. Many important things to do. Many important. Many important." And they run faster, trying to prove through their activity and their insistence that they are indeed fine. Years pass. The person is now running constantly, never resting, because to stop would mean the shadow catches up. They have optimized their life for speed. They have eliminated anything that might slow them down: deep relationships, quiet reflection, genuine feeling. They are exhausted beyond measure, but they tell themselves and everyone else that they are fine, that this is just what life requires, that everyone lives this way. Then one day, whether through illness, loss, or simple collapse, they cannot run anymore. They stop, and the shadow, which they have been fleeing all this time, finally catches up. And in that moment of terror, as the shadow envelops them, something unexpected happens. They realize the shadow is not a monster. It is them. It is every emotion they have denied, every need they have minimized, every part of themselves they have deemed unacceptable. It is their unlived life, their authentic feelings, their real self trying to catch up with the false presentation. And here is the profound truth. The shadow only seemed menacing because it was denied. The moment they turn and face it, the moment they stop running and acknowledge its existence, it begins to integrate. The person does not become the shadow, they become whole. They become themselves, finally. Really themselves. With both light and dark. Both acceptable and unacceptable. Both fine and not fine. This is what happens every time you say, "I'm fine," when you are not. You are running from your shadow. You are denying a part of yourself that is simply trying to be acknowledged, to be integrated into your conscious awareness. And the psyche will not allow this denial to continue indefinitely without consequences. These stories reveal something essential about the human psyche. But now, we must go deeper. We must understand the precise mechanisms at work, the psychological laws that govern this phenomenon. What I am about to share with you comes from decades of sitting with the human soul in all its complexity. First, we must understand what "I'm fine" actually is from a psychological perspective. It is a defense mechanism, one of many that the ego constructs to protect itself from perceived danger. When you say these words reflexively, you are activating a protective barrier. But what exactly are you protecting yourself from? You are protecting yourself from vulnerability, from the discomfort of being truly seen in your struggle. You are protecting yourself from potential judgment, from the fear that others will see you as weak or burdensome. You are protecting yourself from your own difficult emotions, which may feel overwhelming if you acknowledge them. This is what we call the persona, the mask you show to the world. Now, the persona itself is not the problem. We all need some degree of social presentation. The problem arises when the persona becomes so rigid, so completely identified with who you think you are, that you lose touch with what lies beneath it. When you can no longer distinguish between the mask and the face, between the performance and the reality, you have created a dangerous psychological split. There is a mechanism I want you to understand very clearly. Every time you feel something difficult, let us say sadness, or anger, or fear, or shame, and you choose not to acknowledge it, that feeling does not simply disappear. The psyche does not work that way. That feeling, that emotional reality, goes into what I call the shadow. The shadow is the repository of everything you have deemed unacceptable about yourself. In childhood, you learned very quickly what was acceptable and what was not. Perhaps expressing anger resulted in punishment, so anger went into the shadow. Perhaps showing sadness made your parents uncomfortable, so sadness went into the shadow. Perhaps your authentic enthusiasm was too much for the adults around you, so even joy in its fullness went into the shadow. Over years, over decades, you have been sorting yourself into acceptable and unacceptable, and the unacceptable parts have been accumulating in the shadow. Here is what you must understand. The shadow grows in power, proportionate to what you deny. The more you repress, the stronger it becomes. And repressed content does not simply sit quietly in the unconscious. It gains autonomous power. It begins to affect your behavior in ways you do not consciously understand. Let me give you examples from my clinical work. I have seen depression that was actually frozen, rage, anger, that could not be expressed, so it turned inward and became a heavy, immobilizing sadness. I have seen anxiety that was unfelt, grief loss that was never acknowledged, so it manifested as a free-floating sense of danger. I have seen emotional numbness that was actually overwhelming, feeling denied so much emotion that the only way to survive was to feel nothing at all. And here is the terrible cost. When you deny your emotional reality, you dissociate from your body and its wisdom. Your body knows the truth. It feels the tightness in your chest when you swallow anger. It feels the heaviness when you suppress grief. It feels the tension when you perform happiness while feeling despair. But if you consistently override these signals, you lose access to your somatic intelligence. You lose your genuine intuition and instinct. You become divorced from your own organismic knowing. The psychic energy required to maintain this false presentation is enormous. Imagine holding a beach ball underwater. At first, it seems manageable. But try holding it there for hours, for days, for years. This is what you are doing psychically when you maintain "I'm fine" while feeling otherwise. You are using tremendous energy to keep your real feelings submerged, and this creates a profound exhaustion that you may not even recognize as being psychically caused. There are relationship consequences as well, and these are perhaps the most painful. When you consistently present a false self to the world, and someone comes to love or care for that presentation, you experience a terrible loneliness. You are being loved, but not for who you actually are. You are being loved for your performance. And somewhere deep inside, you know that if they saw the real you, the struggling, uncertain, sometimes messy real you, they might not stay. This creates an impossible bind. The more successful you are at presenting "I'm fine," the more isolated you become. You are surrounded by people, but profoundly alone, because no one knows you. No one can know you, because you will not let yourself be known. And here is something else that happens, something insidious. The gap between your conscious identity and your unconscious reality continues to grow. Your conscious mind tells you that you are fine, that you are managing, that you are coping, but your unconscious knows the truth, and it will find ways to communicate this to you. It will communicate through dreams, like my patient's basement room. It will communicate through symptoms, psychosomatic illnesses, compulsive behaviors, sudden emotional outbursts that seem to come from nowhere. It will communicate through projection, which I want to explain to you now. When you deny your own struggles, you often begin to project them onto others. You see in other people the weakness you refuse to acknowledge in yourself. Someone admits they are having a difficult time, and you feel contempt or discomfort or a strong urge to fix them. If they can be struggling and still be okay, still be worthy of respect and care, then what does that mean about your own hidden struggles? It is easier to see them as weak than to acknowledge your own suppressed vulnerability. This mechanism of projection creates a false sense of superiority. I am managing, I am fine, but look at them, falling apart over such small things. This is the ego, defending itself against the truth of the shadow, and it blocks genuine human connection, because you cannot truly meet another person if you are using them as a screen for your own projections. Now, I want to speak to you about something I consider central to psychological health. This is the process by which a person becomes psychologically whole, becomes truly themselves, rather than a collection of social expectations and repressed content. And I can tell you without hesitation that individuation is impossible without acknowledging your full emotional reality. Wholeness does not mean perfection. It does not mean being always happy, always productive, always fine. Wholeness means integrating all aspects of yourself, the light and the dark, the acceptable and the unacceptable, the strong and the vulnerable. It means allowing yourself to be a full human being, not a carefully curated presentation. There is a crucial distinction I want you to understand. The difference between conscious suffering and unconscious suffering. When you deny your difficult emotions, you do not avoid suffering. You simply suffer unconsciously. The pain leaks out in indirect ways, in tension, in compulsions, in vague dissatisfaction, in the deadening of all feeling. This unconscious suffering serves no purpose. It does not lead anywhere. It simply accumulates. But when you acknowledge your suffering consciously, when you allow yourself to say, I am struggling, I am in pain, I am not fine, you transform that suffering into something meaningful. You suffer consciously, which means you can learn from it, grow through it, integrate it into your understanding of yourself and the world. Conscious suffering is the pathway to transformation. This is what I learned during my confrontation with the unconscious that I told you about earlier. I suffered consciously, deliberately, as a choice. And that suffering bore fruit. It led to insight, to development, to the emergence of something new in my understanding. Unconscious suffering, the kind that happens when you maintain, I'm fine, while falling apart inside, leads nowhere. It is sterile, circular, wasteful of your precious life force. Now I must address something about why you cannot simply decide to be honest and solve this problem overnight. The psyche has reasons for its defenses. Good reasons developed over your lifetime. If you were punished or abandoned when you showed certain emotions as a child, your psyche learned to protect you by hiding those emotions. This was adaptive. This helped you survive. The attachment wounds you carry, the early experiences of having your feelings dismissed or shamed or used against you, these are not simply past events. They are active in your current psyche, shaping how safe it feels to be emotionally honest. You cannot bully yourself into vulnerability. You cannot shame yourself into authenticity. The defenses must be understood and respected even as you begin to carefully lower them. There are also cultural and collective pressures at work. The collective unconscious, the shared psychological inheritance of your culture, has strong opinions about emotional expression. In many cultures, there is enormous pressure to appear fine, to be productive, to not burden others, to maintain positive thinking. These are not just individual neuroses. These are collective values that shape every individual psyche within that culture. And there is a genuine risk that you must take seriously. If you have been repressing a great deal of emotional content for many years, releasing it all at once can be overwhelming, both for you and for others. This is why I do not simply tell people to start being radically honest about everything they feel. You must develop the ego strength to contain difficult emotions. You must find or create appropriate containers for emotional truth. This is sophisticated psychological work, not a simple matter of just being yourself. Let me also speak about the relationship between the ego and what I call the self. The ego is your conscious sense of who you are, your day-to-day identity. The self is the totality of your psyche, conscious and unconscious, the fullness of who you actually are. When you say, I'm fine, while feeling otherwise, you are serving the ego's need for security and control at the expense of the self's movement toward wholeness. The ego wants to maintain its story about who you are capable, composed, fine. The self knows that you are far more complex, far more vast than this story allows. The tension between these two creates what we might call a psychological civil war, and you cannot win such a war. The only resolution is integration, allowing the ego to expand its sense of identity to include what the self knows to be true. I have observed something else in my years of practice, something about the spiritual dimension of this work. Every major spiritual tradition speaks about the importance of truth, of authenticity, of knowing yourself. This is not coincidental. There is something sacred about psychological honesty, about allowing yourself to be real. When you deny your true feelings, you are not just lying to others, or even to yourself. You are, in a sense, lying to existence itself. You are saying, "This is not what is happening," when it is precisely what is happening. The psyche, or we might say the soul, has its own integrity. It will not be fundamentally falsified without consequences. You can maintain the lie for a time, perhaps for years, but the soul knows, and it will find ways to bring you back to truth, even if those ways are painful, even if they involve psychological crisis or collapse. Now, you might be wondering about the collective implications of this. What happens when not just individuals but entire societies operate on the principle of, "I'm fine"? I would suggest to you that we are living through precisely this experiment. Modern society, particularly in its Western forms, has created enormous pressure toward appearing fine. Social media amplifies this pressure exponentially. Everyone is curating a presentation of their lives as successful, enjoyable, meaningful, fine. But beneath this collective facade, there is widespread psychological suffering, rates of depression, anxiety, addiction, suicide. These are symptoms of a collective psyche that is profoundly out of balance. We have created a culture where everyone is pretending to be fine while falling apart inside. And this collective denial has consequences not just for individual mental health, but for our capacity to address genuine collective challenges. If we cannot be honest about what we are actually experiencing, how can we respond appropriately to reality? If everyone is performing wellness while experiencing distress, we create a hall of mirrors where no one can find solid ground. The collective "I'm fine" syndrome creates a shared delusion, and in that delusion, we lose our capacity for genuine collective wisdom. I am speaking to you as someone who has witnessed the devastating consequences when the collective shadow erupts. I lived through 2 world wars, watched supposed civilization tear itself apart with unprecedented brutality. This happens when too much is denied, when the shadow grows too large, when the gap between collective presentation and collective reality becomes unsustainable. What is denied personally and collectively will eventually erupt. And it will do so destructively unless we learn to meet it consciously. Let me speak now about the alchemical dimension of this work, because alchemy provides us with profound metaphors for psychological transformation. The alchemists spoke of the nigredo, the blackening, the descent into darkness and dissolution. This is what happens when you stop saying, "I'm fine," and allow yourself to acknowledge the truth of your psychological state. It feels like falling apart. It feels like death, but the alchemists understood that this dissolution was necessary for transformation. You cannot transform lead into gold without first breaking down the lead. You cannot achieve psychological wholeness without first allowing the false structures to dissolve. The nigredo is followed by albedo, the whitening, the emergence of clarity, and finally, rubedo, the reddening, the achievement of the philosopher's stone, which in psychological terms is the integrated self. When you say, "I'm fine" while struggling, you are trying to skip the nigredo. You are trying to maintain the appearance of gold while remaining lead. But transformation does not work this way. You must allow the dissolution. You must descend into the darkness and chaos of your actual experience. Only then can something new emerge. The integration of opposites is central to this work. You cannot be whole if you only accept one half of your experience. You cannot be only light, only positive, only fine. You must integrate the opposite, the darkness, the struggle, the not fineness. It is in holding these opposites together, in allowing yourself to be both strong and vulnerable, both capable and struggling, that you achieve genuine psychological balance. Now you understand the problem. You see the mechanism. You recognize the cost. The question becomes, what do we actually do? How do we begin this practice of psychological honesty without overwhelming ourselves or others? Let me give you specific, practical methods that honor the complexity we have discussed. First, I want to introduce you to what I call the graduated response practice. This is about replacing "I'm fine" with more truthful but still boundaried responses. You do not need to share your entire psychological reality with every person who asks how you are. That would not be appropriate or helpful. But you can begin to introduce more honesty in graduated levels. Level 1 is what I would call minimal honesty. Instead of "I'm fine," you might say, "I'm managing," or "I'm working through something," or "It's a challenging time, but I'm handling it." These responses are still relatively protected, but they introduce a crack in the facade. They acknowledge that not everything is perfect, without requiring you to explain or elaborate. You are being truthful without being vulnerable. Level 2 involves more specific acknowledgement. "I'm struggling with something at work," or "I'm dealing with some family stress," or "I've been feeling more anxious lately." Notice that you are naming a general category of difficulty without going into detail. This is appropriate for acquaintances, colleagues, people with whom you have moderate but not intimate relationships. Level 3 is deeper honesty, reserved for closer relationships. "I'm honestly not doing well right now," or "I'm going through something difficult and I'm not sure how to handle it," or "I'm feeling quite lost at the moment." This level of response invites connection, invites the other person to step into a more caring role if they have the capacity. The skill here is learning to match your level of honesty to the relationship and context. You are not being dishonest when you give a level 1 response to a casual acquaintance. You are being appropriately boundaried. But you are also not saying, "I'm fine," when it is manifestly untrue. You are introducing reality in doses that are manageable for both you and the other person. Second practice I want to give you is what I call the internal truth practice. This is perhaps the most important practice because it involves telling the truth to yourself first before you ever consider sharing it with another. Each day, perhaps in the morning or before sleep, ask yourself this question: what am I actually feeling right now? Do not accept your first, automatic answer. Your conditioned response will likely be "fine," or "okay," or something equally vague. Push past this. Scan your body. Where are you holding tension? What is the quality of sensation in your chest, your belly, your throat? The body tells the emotional truth that the mind often denies. Name the emotions you discover with specificity, not just bad, but sad, or angry, or afraid, or ashamed. Not just stressed, but overwhelmed, or resentful, or anxious about a specific thing. The act of naming is powerful. It brings unconscious content into consciousness. It begins the integration process. I recommend keeping a journal of this practice. Write about the gap between your external presentation and your internal reality. Today, I told everyone I was fine. What I actually felt was a profound sense of inadequacy after making a mistake at work, and beneath that, a childhood fear of being found worthless. This kind of writing is not for anyone else's eyes. It is you being ruthlessly honest with yourself, creating a space where no performance is required. The third practice is what I call the conscious container practice. You must identify safe relationships where deeper truth can be shared. Not everyone in your life needs to know your full emotional reality, nor can everyone hold it appropriately. But you need at least one relationship, perhaps a trusted friend, a therapist, a partner who has demonstrated their capacity where you can share more fully. The analytic hour, the therapeutic relationship, is designed to be precisely this kind of container. It is a space where you can bring unconscious material into consciousness with a trained witness who will not be overwhelmed, who will not judge, who will help you understand what emerges. If you do not have access to therapy, you can create similar containers with careful intention. Before sharing deep emotional truth, learn to ask, do you have capacity to hear something difficult right now? This honors both your need to share and the other person's current state. It creates consent around emotional intimacy. And sometimes you can say, I don't need you to fix anything. I just need you to witness what I'm experiencing. This removes the pressure to solve or change what you are feeling and allows the other person to simply be present with you. The fourth practice is shadow work. Each day, ask yourself, what did I deny or minimize today? Perhaps you felt hurt by a comment, but told yourself it was nothing. Perhaps you felt angry about being interrupted but suppressed it immediately. Perhaps you felt sad, but distracted yourself rather than allowing the feeling. Track patterns over time. What feelings are most frequently suppressed? For many people, it is anger. For others, sadness. For some, even joy or excitement feels dangerous to express fully. These patterns reveal your personal shadow content, the specific ways your psyche has learned to protect you by hiding parts of yourself. I developed a technique I call active imagination, which can be useful here. You can have a dialogue with your denied emotions. If you consistently suppress anger, you might write a letter from the perspective of your anger. I am the anger you refuse to acknowledge. Here is what I have to tell you. Allow that part of yourself to speak without censorship. You will be surprised what emerges. What wisdom these denied parts carry. The fifth practice is somatic work. I'm fine lives in your body. Usually, it is held in the throat, the place where truth is swallowed rather than spoken. Or in the chest, where emotions are compressed and held tight. Or in the belly, where anxiety and fear are carried. When you notice yourself starting to say, I'm fine, while feeling otherwise, pause. Breathe into wherever you feel that tension. Put your hand on that place in your body. Simply acknowledge, this is where I hold the truth I'm not speaking. This creates somatic awareness. Reconnects you with your body's wisdom. In private, you can practice completing the expression that you suppressed. If you swallowed anger, allow yourself to speak it aloud to an empty room, or write it in a journal, or move your body in ways that express that energy. If you suppressed tears, allow yourself to cry. The body needs to complete these expressions, even if you do them after the fact, even if you do them alone. This prevents the accumulation of held emotion that leads to chronic tension and eventually to psychological symptoms. Now, I want to emphasize something crucial about all these practices. These are not rules. These are experiments. You are learning a new language, the language of your own soul. And like any language, this takes time and practice. You do not need to revolutionize your entire communication style overnight. That would likely be overwhelming and unsustainable. Start small. Perhaps you begin simply by noticing how often you say, I'm fine, when it is not true. Just notice. Awareness is the first step. Then perhaps you experiment with a level 1 response in a low-stakes situation. See how it feels. See what happens. Build slowly. The goal here is consciousness, not confession. You are not trying to burden everyone with your psychological process. You are trying to bring awareness to your own emotional reality so that you can choose consciously how and when and with whom to share it, even if you never speak certain truths aloud to another person. The act of acknowledging them to yourself creates profound internal shifts. This is lifelong work, not a weekend project. Individuation, the process of becoming whole, unfolds over decades. You are not trying to achieve some final state of perfect authenticity. You are simply trying to live with more consciousness, more honesty, more integration than you did yesterday. Be patient with yourself. Be compassionate. You develop the habit of saying, "I'm fine," for good reasons, and you will not dismantle those defenses quickly or easily. There will be times when you revert to old patterns, when the automatic response comes out before you can stop it. This is normal. This is part of the process. What matters is the overall direction of movement. Are you becoming more aware of your internal reality? Are you finding ways to acknowledge difficult emotions, first to yourself, and then gradually to others? Are you developing relationships that can hold more truth? Are you learning to listen to your body, to honor your shadow, to allow yourself to be real? If you can answer yes to any of these questions, you are doing the work. You are on the path of individuation. You are recovering yourself from beneath the layers of performance and denial. Let me speak to one more thing before we close. There will be resistance to this work, both from within and from without. Your own psyche will resist because change is frightening, because the familiar defenses feel safe even when they are costly. Other people will resist because your authenticity challenges their denial, because they have grown accustomed to the version of you that says, "I'm fine." Because your realness requires them to be more real, and they may not be ready for that. Do not let this resistance stop you. Expect it, understand it, work with it compassionately, but do not abandon yourself to make others comfortable. Do not return to the prison of "I'm fine" simply because it is easier in the short term. The psyche has its own integrity, its own movement toward wholeness. When you align yourself with this movement, when you begin to honor your actual experience rather than your presented experience, you tap into a source of energy and meaning that cannot be found in performance and pretense. You will feel more alive. Paradoxically, even as you acknowledge difficulty and struggle, you will feel more vitality because you are no longer using all your energy to maintain a false front. You will feel more connected because genuine relationships can form when you allow yourself to be genuinely known. You will feel more yourself because you will be recovering aspects of yourself that have been hidden in shadow. This is the promise of this work, and it is a promise I have seen fulfilled in countless lives, including my own. The path through honesty into wholeness is difficult but profoundly worthwhile. It is nothing less than the recovery of your own soul. So, let me now offer you a summary, a distillation of everything we have explored. The core wisdom is this: your psyche knows when you are lying to it, and it will not let you rest. "I'm fine" is not a neutral phrase. It is an act of self-abandonment, a betrayal of your own depths. Every time you speak these words while feeling their opposite, you are feeding the shadow, widening the gap between who you present yourself to be and who you actually are. The cost of this denial is enormous. It manifests as psychological symptoms, as physical tension, as relationship loneliness, as a vague sense of meaninglessness and disconnection. It blocks the path of individuation, prevents you from becoming whole. And collectively, when entire cultures operate on this principle, we lose our connection to reality, our capacity to respond appropriately to what is actually happening. But the solution is not brutal honesty or emotional exhibitionism. It is a gentle, courageous practice of first telling yourself the truth, then finding appropriate vessels for that truth in the external world. It is learning to match your level of sharing to your relationships and contexts. It is developing the capacity to contain difficult emotions consciously rather than denying them unconsciously. It is shadow work, somatic awareness, the cultivation of genuine containers for authentic sharing. This is the beginning of individuation, of becoming whole. It is the work of a lifetime, and it asks everything of you. But it offers you something in return that cannot be found any other way. The possibility of being real, of living from your actual depths rather than your presented surface, of experiencing genuine connection with yourself and others. Let me offer you an affirmation, something to carry with you as you do this work. You might say this to yourself when you feel the pressure to perform fineness while experiencing struggle. I am not fine, and that is fine. I am a human being, engaged in the difficult work of consciousness. I honor what moves within me, in all its complexity and difficulty. Carefully, consciously, to the world. My wholeness depends not on being well-adjusted, but on being truthfully engaged with my entire psychological reality. I allow myself to be real. This is not easy to practice. Your conditioning will push back. The collective pressure will push back. But somewhere deep within you, there is a part that recognizes this truth, that has been waiting for permission to be acknowledged. That is the part I am speaking to now. That is the part that will guide you forward if you allow it. Before we part, I want to return to where we began. You say, "I'm fine," many times. And in most of those moments, you have a choice. You can continue the automatic response, the reflexive denial, or you can pause, breathe, check in with your actual experience, and choose a response that honors your reality even if it does not fully expose it. This small choice, made again and again, has the power to transform your relationship with yourself and with the world. If these ideas have resonated with something deep within you, I invite you to subscribe to this channel for more explorations of the psyche. Leave a like if you found value here. It helps others discover this work, and there are many who need to hear these truths. And please, share in the comments your own experience with this practice, with the cost of saying, "I'm fine," or with the relief of finally speaking your truth. I read these comments, and there is much we can learn from one another's journeys toward wholeness. Until we meet again, I wish you the courage to face yourself honestly, the compassion to do so gently, and the wisdom to know that this work is the most important work you can do. Your psyche is calling you toward wholeness. The question is only whether you will answer that call.